The morning sun barely filtered through the faded curtains of Jasmine's small apartment as she stood in front of the mirror, tying her hair with trembling hands. Her suit, slightly worn but carefully ironed, hung loosely on her frame. It was her big day, a job interview that could change everything, but her mind wasn't on her resume. It was on Ava. Her 2-year-old daughter sat on the floor in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes and whining softly for attention. Jasmine knelt beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead and whispering, "I'm sorry, baby, mommy has to go." She had tried everything. Called 3 friends, texted 2 neighbors, no luck. She stared at her nearly empty wallet and shook her head. A babysitter, even just for a few hours, was out of reach. Rent was due next week, and groceries were already sparse. The job was promising, steady hours, benefits, something stable after months of temp work and part-time shifts. But she couldn't leave Ava alone. Her chest tightened. Jasmine glanced at the clock. If she left now, she might just make it. But what would she do with Ava? Her eyes darted from her daughter to the door, and back again. Then, without another thought, she picked up Ava, grabbed her small backpack, and headed out. The only thing scarier than walking into that interview with a toddler was not walking in at all. This job wasn't just for her. It was for their future. Jasmine stood on the sidewalk in front of the towering office building, her heart pounding harder than her footsteps. The sleek glass windows reflected a world she didn't feel like she belonged in, polished, professional, out of reach. She tightened her grip on Ava's tiny hand. The toddler, wearing her favorite pink jacket and clutching a juice box, looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to summon confidence she didn't feel. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under bright lights. Jasmine approached the front desk, her voice barely steady. "Hi, I have an interview at 10. Jasmine Reyes." The receptionist, poised and expressionless, looked up, noting the child beside her. Jasmine rushed to explain. "I couldn't find childcare. I didn't want to cancel. I'm so sorry for bringing her, She stopped herself, biting back the desperation rising in her throat. There was a pause. The receptionist's eyes softened, just a flicker, before she picked up the phone. "You should come down here," she said quietly to someone on the other end, glancing again at Ava. Jasmine's stomach twisted. Was she being flagged? Would they tell her to leave? She knelt beside Ava, brushing crumbs off her jacket, whispering, "Just be quiet for a little while, okay?" Ava nodded solemnly. Then, the elevator dinged. Jasmine stood quickly, trying to fix her posture and her nerves. The doors opened, and out stepped the last person she expected to see. Margaret Caldwell stepped out of the elevator with the quiet authority of someone used to making big decisions. Crisp navy suit, sharp eyes, silver-streaked hair pulled into a low twist, she looked every bit the executive Jasmine had imagined. Jasmine's mouth went dry. This was the woman who would decide her future, and she was standing there with a toddler in tow. Margaret's gaze swept the lobby and landed on them. For a split second, Jasmine saw the hesitation, the flicker of surprise, maybe even disapproval. Jasmine opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, to beg for understanding. But before she could speak, Ava let out a shy, "Hi," waving with a juice-stained hand. Margaret blinked, then slowly smiled. She crouched down, ignoring the heels that clearly weren't built for it, and said, "Well, aren't you a brave little visitor?" Ava giggled. Jasmine stared in disbelief. Margaret stood, now looking Jasmine in the eye. "You came anyway," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. Jasmine nodded, unsure if she was about to be scolded or escorted out. Instead, Margaret motioned toward the elevator. "Come on. Let's talk." Jasmine hesitated. "With her?" "Yes," Margaret replied. "Both of you." As the elevator doors closed behind them, Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, a sliver of hope pushed through the fear. This wasn't how interviews were supposed to go. But maybe, just maybe, this was how things needed to change. The office was elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, but Jasmine barely noticed. Her focus was split, half on answering questions clearly, and half on Ava, who was now happily seated on the carpet with a notepad and colored pens Margaret had pulled from her desk drawer. The toddler hummed to herself, content and quiet. Jasmine, on the other hand, was a storm barely held together. Margaret sat across from her, hands folded, listening with an attentiveness that caught Jasmine off guard. There were no raised eyebrows, no glances at the clock, no sighs of impatience. Just calm, steady interest. Jasmine spoke about her previous jobs, customer service, admin work, juggling shifts at night and daycare during the day. She explained how she'd studied online while Ava napped, how she'd never been late to a shift in 3 years, how all she needed was one stable opportunity. Mid-sentence, her voice cracked. She tried to cover it with a cough, but tears welled anyway. "I'm sorry," she whispered, embarrassed. It's been a lot." Margaret reached across the desk and placed a hand gently over hers. "You don't have to apologize for being a mother. Or for being strong." Silence hung for a beat, thick with emotion. Then Margaret smiled. "You're exactly the kind of person I want on my team. If you'll have us." Jasmine's breath hitched. "Wait, what?" Margaret nodded. "The job is yours. And we'll figure out child care, together." 2 weeks later, Jasmine stood outside the same glass building, but everything felt different. This time, her steps were steady. Ava walked beside her, proudly wearing a tiny backpack and grinning from ear to ear. Inside, the lobby felt less intimidating, not because it had changed, but because Jasmine had. She checked Ava in at the firm's newly established in-house daycare, a small, colorful room filled with books, toys, and soft rugs. It was a pilot program Margaret had quietly launched after their interview, inspired by one moment of humanity. No parent should have to choose between their child and their future, she'd said. As Jasmine kissed Ava goodbye, the little girl waved and ran to join 2 other children. Jasmine smiled and turned toward the elevator, toward her new job, her new start. Upstairs, she passed another young woman nervously waiting in the lobby, a toddler in her lap. Jasmine caught her eye and gave a reassuring nod. "You're in the right place," she whispered. Margaret met her at the office door with a cup of coffee and a warm smile. "Ready for your first meeting?" Jasmine nodded, eyes shining. "More than ever." As she walked into the conference room, she glanced back through the glass, at the daycare, at the lobby, at the people coming in. She realized something powerful: this wasn't just a job. It was a place built on compassion, where someone had dared to lead with empathy. And that's what America needs more of.